UCLA student Winston Chang once said, "You can't lose the forest by looking at the trees." Unfortunately, that's what he just did in his own speech recently. So basically, what Winston did in his last speech was go over the definitions, talking about these minor points, and then giving you a bunch of data that really, in the big picture, doesn't matter. And in the end, it didn't present his own case, which is going to really not make it very difficult for him to win this round at this point. So let's clarify the definitions that he talked about. Okay. So you can talk about government and NGOs, that's fine. But the reason that I clarified this is that you can't really fiat any of these things. What that means is you can't talk about, in debates usually we talk about, the United States as an agent that we're controlling. We can't control multiple agents, and he never provided any justification why this debate should be about the Red Cross and this organization and this organization and this organization that are all going together and all putting their aid in here. We can talk about the United States federal government because it's very easy and it's just one organization and it makes it all very clear. Moreover, as the affirmative, I have the right to define these things, and Winston has never provided any justification why it's gone above and beyond that makes it unfair for him to debate, and that's something that he needs to do if he's challenging my definition. So, let's move on to the actual incentive argument, and here I want you to just note one thing that's very, very, very important here. So he spends all of this time talking about the justifications on the first subpoint here, but he spends zero time talking about the impacts of the subpoint B. So even if I'm winning just a little bit on why there's a reason to reform, and there were no hard and fast turns on that case, you should be pulling through and extending the entire impact about rape that occurs in these countries, about how the governments are actually encouraging rapists to marry the people who they rape, how governments are encouraging female circumcision, how governments are oppressing women and preventing them from living full lives, how they're being subhuman. All of these things are things that Winston did not even touch. He dropped these arguments, and therefore they are true. So, remember that. There is an incredible magnitude to these arguments, even if the probability is low, because he has 4 responses. But, guess what? I'm going to respond to those responses right now and try to restructure this case and show you why there actually is an incentive for these countries and why it's going to create the best of both worlds so that we can solve women's rights and also maintain foreign aid going to these countries and making the world a better place. Okay? So, first, he makes the claim that I don't have any warrant. I think I have only warrants. The problem is that I don't have a lot of evidence. But that's okay, because at the very start of this debate, I said that it was a debate of principles. This is not a debate that has a lot of evidence. Moreover, Winston didn't attack this point. He didn't redefine this as a policy debate, and therefore he's accepting the fact that we can debate this in kind of a vacuum. We can talk about this just logically. And so I don't need to have evidence like he would claim. In fact, I have lots of warrants, and that's okay. I have logic. His side doesn't. I think we're fine there. Next, go to Kenya. Winston really refused to explain what the heck this actually means. He talks about how Kenya is dancing. I don't really understand this. No one really understands this because it was totally unclear. We're not sure if what Kenya is doing supports our side or their side. We're not even sure if Kenya is a country that has women's rights where they're oppressed. So there are so many just muddy things here that make it unclear that you really shouldn't be voting on this point anyway. Third, he talks about how direct aid is good. Nah. Direct aid is bad. Direct aid is going to put a bandage on these countries when we need to stop what's actually happening in these countries in terms of oppression of women. So if we have all this direct aid from NGOs happening, that's a really bad thing. I think that that's a terrible thing because it's preventing the actual harms by having these by solving these minor problems that come up or like disease outbreaks that come up. We're solving those, and that's perpetuating these governments. It's giving them legitimacy because the people say, oh, look it, you solved this problem, and therefore you must be a good government. I don't want that. I want to change these countries from the ground up so that there's no more systemic oppression that I talked about in subpoint D. That is the ultimate goal here. We want these countries to be free of these tyrannical systems. And so direct aid is something that's going to put a bandage here, and it's going to make people think that the problem is not actually there. But there is a problem, and so I say direct aid is bad, even if it's from an NGO. Fourth, he talks about using people as tools. He doesn't provide his own framework here. He doesn't tell you why you shouldn't just be evaluating this from terms of who's creating the most benefit. I think that's a fairly clear standard. And so when he makes a similar argument on his first contention about no standard, you should just look at that and laugh, because he doesn't provide a standard either. So what you should do is just really look at this as a matter of principle. What do you think the United States should do? I think it's very clear. What's not really clear is his second contention about how this harms people in lots of ways. There's nothing here. There's no evidence. He effectively presented no case, and he shouldn't be allowed to present a new one, and if he does, I'm just going to turn it in the last speech, and he's going to lose. Thank you.